Okay, we are going to do a special video now up here on Stony Hill, or the Loop, about a photo mystery. And before we actually look at the photo, I'm going to go and put this video in slow motion and focus on some of these landscapes, like this boulder here you see with the tree growing out of it, and also on some of the monuments that are here today on the Loop. We're going to talk about a photo that was taken here, and then of course, how the photo was taken and why it's such a strange photo. But as we do, we're going to walk through an area that back during the Battle of Gettysburg did not look this way. You see today a lot of these trees in this area, but this was pretty much an open rocky field back in 1863. And we're going to really look at some of these boulders. And as we walk into the wooded area here, you're going to see that a lot of these boulders, unlike boulders down at Devil's Den or Little Round Top, are covered with growth or moss. And that's simply because they don't have a lot of people every day of the year walking on them. They still erode, but they don't erode like the boulders, say, at Devil's Den that have, millions of people crawling across them all year, every year. So these are things these are rocks and boulders that are not very well visited. And quite frankly, especially this time of the year, when you got things like poison ivy and even some snakes and things like that are here in this cooler wooded area on the Stony Loop. And we're going to look at some vintage photographs from the 1880s and 1890s that were taken of this area and some of these boulders to kind of get and pinpoint the area of where the actual photograph was taken. Now, on July 2nd of 1863, Union soldiers, mostly from Massachusetts, were involved in the fighting in and around the Rose Farm, and this sat just uphill from the Rose Farm in the Rose Woods, and it was called the Stony Hill. And as you can see by the boulders today, it was very stony, was then, still is now. These soldiers are from the regiments of like the 18th Massachusetts, the 2nd Massachusetts, the 22nd Massachusetts, and also the 1st Michigan. And here's what I'm pointing out now is this growth and this mold and mossy substance that's all over these rocks. Again, because not many people venture here into the woods and attempt, like I have, to catch poison ivy or maybe to have a snake slither by you. So I'm doing this so we can get a close up of some of these rocks so that when we look at the photograph, we can identify when and how the photograph was taken. And you'll see from the photograph that was taken in the late 1800s that these monuments that sit here today were here in an open field with a bunch of these boulders, and that there was even a road that no longer exists, a pathway, and we're going to look at where the location of that pathway was. And some of these boulders, like this one in front of us, are actually quite large. I mean, they're humongous rocks and boulders here. And of course, some others are small, and they have a distinct shape to them. So that if you look at the photograph, the vintage photograph, you can actually determine that this is where that boulder is in that particular photograph. And we're going to end just beyond this large boulder as we go out onto the Loop Road there by the 2nd Massachusetts Andrews Sharpshooters Monument here on the battlefield. So again, we've just taken a slow motion walk through the Stony Hill inside where a lot of people don't get to walk or travel, just to give you an idea of the lay of the land. The very rocky part of what was called the Stony Hill, and for good reason. And just up here, as we come to the edge of the woods, you're going to see the 22nd Massachusetts Monument. If you look right about top center right now, you'll see the 22nd Massachusetts Monument, which can also be seen in that photograph. And that photograph was actually taken by a man named William Tipton. And what throws people off from the photograph is that the angle, it seems to be taken from up high, and also the fact that there's a road there. So in the late 1800s, there was a very large tree that had grown about right where I'm standing now. And it appears that what Tipton or maybe someone working for Tipton did was they climbed up at the top of that tree and took a photograph looking downward in this direction. And if you look at the bottom left corner of that photograph, and I will post the photograph, there appears to be tree branches. And the photograph rather faces the 18th Massachusetts Monument, which sits right in front of us. And if you look slightly to the right of the monument, you'll see this strange boulder, which seems to have like a bush or something protruding from it. And actually, that is this tree that you see here today. It was tiny, so it's not a witness tree to the battle, but it does show up in some post-battle photographs. And if you continue to look at the photographs, you'll see boulders such as this one, which were on the edge of the road. And what we walk through first in slow motion, and we walk through again, you'll be able to see and start pointing out a lot of these boulders and their relation to the four monuments that show up clearly in the Tipton photograph, which is the 18th Massachusetts, the 2nd Massachusetts, also known as Andrew's Sharpshooters, the 22nd Massachusetts, and then on the extreme right side of the photograph, of course, would be the 1st Michigan. We're going to take a closer look at each one of these monuments, and this one is to the 22nd Massachusetts Volunteers. And as I pan over here to the right, this is the monument that's at the extreme right of the photograph, which is the 1st Michigan Volunteers. This is the extreme right flank of William Tipton's photograph of Stony Hill, which was taken from an elevated area. And I do want to mention the way I believe that this photograph was taken was simply something that I used to do actually as a teenager when I would build a tree fort. I would find a big thick tree, I would find wooden planks, and I would nail them one at a time, starting at the bottom, going up the tree, and make myself a ladder. And then when I would get to a desired area, I would then actually build a tree fort, where in this case you build a platform, a flat platform, and then in which you can mount your camera. And again, this is the extreme right of the photograph from where it was taken in the late 1800s, from what I believe is a platform at the top of the tree. And again, we're going to walk right by the 22nd Massachusetts here, and we're going to walk over toward the 2nd Massachusetts Monument. 2nd Massachusetts Monument is one of the more confusing and also nicer looking monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. Andrew's Sharpshooters, as it's called. It depicts a soldier with a rifle in his hand, but the rifle also seems to be cut off, and that was not broken. It was done on purpose. I also want to mention that in the late 1890s through about 1915, 1916, there was an electric trolley that went right by here on the Stony Loop and into the woods there in front of us. And this was a way for tourists to get a guided tour of the Gettysburg battlefield. Of course, it went right through this loop area, and at that time, you would be explained to what was going on during the battle in this area. So, again, this is the 2nd Massachusetts Monument, which also shows up in that photograph in the late 1800s, just 25 years after the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, I think what is so confusing about a lot of the monuments and flank markers, especially around the Stony Loop, is how they intermingle one another. In other words, maybe some of the regimental markers are on separate lines, but you'll find a left flank marker of one regiment inside the line of a right flank marker of another regiment, as you can see here with the 22nd and 2nd Massachusetts flank markers. And that's because these monuments are so close together and the battle lines were so close together that there was the ability for troops to be not just shoulder to shoulder next to one another, but even in confusion in the part of the battle within one another's regimental line. So when the regiments would come back to place their monuments, of course they did them at different times, and so they would place their monument and then place their left and flank markers, and maybe 6 months later or a year later, another regiment would dedicate a monument here at Gettysburg and say, wait a minute, this is where our left flank marker is, but the other unit's right flank marker is in there. So they would actually put it within the bounds of the other regiment's flank marker. So again, you have a little bit of a hodgepodge when it comes, especially in this area of the Stony Hill, with flank markers. And of course, some of the flank markers on the Stony Hill seem to be out of the way, or what they say, off the beaten path. You got to walk through a wooded area to find a regiment's left or right flank marker. However, as depicted in that photograph and also during the Battle of Gettysburg, this area was open. So when these monuments were dedicated at that time, their monuments were not, and their markers were not in a wooded area. And again, we're back here at the 22nd Massachusetts marker, giving it another look. I like to think that this is one of the more picturesque and peaceful parts of the battlefield, because not a lot of people visit, really. I mean, you have the Rose Farm in the distance over here. And, not too far away, you have the actual Rose Farm. And then, of course, you have the bloody wheat field. And, you've probably just come from Little Round Top in the Devil's Den area. Obviously, you're looking at getting to the wheat field. And then after the wheat field, most people just drive right on by like that car does without stopping. And they're on their way to other areas of the battlefield like the Excelsior Field or this Trossel Farm to see the battle damage. So this is an area that quite often gets overlooked. And so it's neat to do a study of the Stony Hill and the monuments that get less visited than some of the more common monuments on more common ground here at Gettysburg. And so as we finish up here at the 22nd Massachusetts Monument, we're going to take another quick look at the 1st Michigan Monument, since again that does sit at the extreme right-hand side of that photograph. And in the photograph as it's depicted, you'll see, the round bronze marker that's on it and so forth. So again, studying this area a little bit more, you have to study not only the placement of the monument, since they show up in the photograph that way, but the ground as well. And fortunately for us in this area, it is a very rocky, boulder-filled ground. And of course, other than the loop road that was put in here, the ground was not totally destroyed. It still predominantly looks the same way it did in 1863, except for the overgrowth of trees. So let's go take a look at the 1st Michigan regimental marker, which this is it here. And if you see the bronze plaques here at the base of the boulder, you'll also notice that in the late 1800s photograph. Now, 2 of the regiments, this regiment, the 1st Michigan Volunteers, as well as the 22nd Massachusetts, were actually a part of William Tilton's brigade, which was from the 5th Corps, 1st Division, 1st Brigade of the Union Army. And in a moment, as we here zoom in one last time on the Rose Farm, but in a moment, we're going to go over and take a look at Tilton's brigade marker, which sits just behind this monument. It doesn't show up in the Tipton photograph, so it's either not there at that time or it may be obstructed by a boulder. But this is the brigade marker for Tilton's brigade, in which 2 of these regiments and the monuments that we're looking at today were a part of this actual brigade that fought here on the Stony Hill. And Stony Hill is a lot like Culp's Hill, where because of its placement in the Battle of Gettysburg, there were different brigades. Like, not all the soldiers were from the 5th Corps. Not all soldiers were from the same brigade. A lot of these soldiers were being moved into this area at the last minute. Now, this monument, the 18th Massachusetts, is the one I really like to focus on, because this is the monument that you first see when you see the William Tipton photograph. And also that tree that you see there to the left that appears to be growing out of the boulder, back then it is growing out of a rock. And of course, this was made by Smith Granite Company of Westerly, Rhode Island, which a lot of the monuments on the battlefield were made from that same company. And in the photograph, you can see the boulder that the monument is sitting on. And of course, this tree here to the right that appears to be growing out of a boulder, you could see it in its infancy stages at the time that the photograph was taken. But one thing you do notice there is that there is a road from looking at the photograph that kind of forks off to the left that is no longer there today. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at where that road used to be. Now, the reason it isn't there today, of course, is because the modern loop road was built to handle the automobile as to people walking on that road or using a horse-drawn carriage. And you can still see the traces of where the road is. The ground, of course, never totally gets back to what it was back then, but you can see road traces in a lot of spots on the Gettysburg battlefield where there used to be roads and there are roads no longer. Again, I'm going to zoom in on Smith Granite Company out of Westerly, Rhode Island. And I would say if you come up to the loop, or what we call the Stony Hill, there's this parking lot there right behind where your bicycle is. It's like a little pull off. I would always recommend that you get out of your car there, and as some of these guys are doing as I'm filming this video, they're just, walking by the monuments, taking a look at them, walking on the dirt path trails, which used to be part of the road trail, and just get a better look at the landscape of the ground. And imagine being a soldier here on July 2nd, 1863, out in the open field. Of course, you would have used a lot of these boulders as protection and shelter from the gunfire that's going on. But you also would have been out in the hot summer sun with the sun beating down on you, approximately 90 degrees. And this would have been a tough spot to fight in. The wheat field was a tough spot to fight in. So now we're standing on the old roadbed that came, from where the photograph is taken by the 18th Massachusetts, and down here closer to the road today. And you can see the trace of what's left of this rocky dirt road. The road itself sat just a little bit to the right of the current walking path, and we're going to walk through where the road used to be today. And I've tried to place some helps markers out on the ground. So as we pass up here near the 116th Pennsylvania and come up to that dirt pull-off, and what I'll try to do is place some sticks on the road. This is about where the road met, and again, the photograph was taken from a vantage point. So right there where I'm showing where my hand is where the dirt road that used to be to the left used to sit. And again, this very rock right here can be seen in the photograph, as this one can also be seen in the photograph, as well as the rock and boulder that the monument is mounted in. You can actually see this small rock in the photograph, and then the road would go just to the left of it right here today, where there's a small growth of trees. But one of the more fascinating boulders is the one that depicts what seems to be, I call it it looks like a chair. It's got a boulder behind it, and then one in front of it that looks like a seat. And then in the late 1800s seems to have a little twig or a bush or something growing out of it. Today, it's a rather large tree. And you can see it's grown completely between these two boulders. And this rock is definitely depicted to the right side of the 18th Massachusetts monument in the William Tipton photograph. Now, as you can see, I've drawn on the ground this trace path of the old dirt road. And again, I'll repost the photograph taken from the vantage point near where my car is up there, where the photograph was taken, and you can actually see this road forking off to the left-hand side. And again, this is something, if you come out here, it is a very peaceful and quiet spot, but it's also an interesting spot to study the then and now of the Gettysburg battlefield. There is also a U.S. marker over here. And next to this U.S. marker, in the photograph, you can actually see two guys standing here on the side of this road where you see this boulder, but you don't see where I just blocked with my hand the monument to the 116th Pennsylvania. So again, right over here where this brigade marker is, there was a tree, most likely where a platform was mounted. And on the extreme right side of the photograph, just before the right, you do see two gentlemen in the photograph standing on the dirt road. And so again, the mystery with this Stony Hill photograph, I think, is that there was a tree here, and someone built a ladder, with steps going up a tree till they got to a height that was desired, and then they built a platform and probably used a rope or something to hoist a camera up there and take a photograph. And in that photograph at the bottom left-hand side, you can actually see branches from the tree. So I think that kind of unravels the mystery of the photograph. And again, if you look for rocks and boulders in the photograph, you'll notice near the two men in the photograph standing along the side of the road, there is this boulder right here that shows up in that photograph. Now, one thing that doesn't show up in the photograph, but since we're here on the Stony Hill, and we're going to take a quick look at, is this 116th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Monument, just because they did fight here on July 2nd of 1863 on the Stony Hill, and also because, in my opinion, it's one of the more beautiful monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. It depicts a wounded soldier with all of his accoutrements against a protection of a stone wall, and he's been what appears to be mortally wounded, possibly dying. And you can see the expression on his face. You can see the pain on his face. And because this monument sits at a spot where it sits up high, you really never, unless you're extremely tall, 6'8" or so, you don't really get to see the detail of the soldier. You kind of see it from the angle that we're looking at it now. You just see a man laying on the ground, his knee slightly raised. But if you walk over to the monument without climbing on the monument, we don't want to do that. But with that, if we walk over closer to the monument and you have, either like a selfie stick or you raise your hand and you can take some pictures, you actually get to see the detail. You get to see the facial expression of this young boy who's been mortally wounded in his face. And then, of course, you can see the accoutrements, for everything from his forage cap to the breastplate that's going across, his U.S. breastplate, and his cartridge box and scabbard and bayonet and U.S. buckle, and even to the wrinkles in his pants and the creases in his shoes and the canteen and the rifle that's fallen by his feet, and of course the great depiction of an earthwork stone wall. So it's a very beautiful, very picturesque monument of this Pennsylvania regiment that fought here on the Stony Hill. And though it doesn't show up in the Tipton photograph, it is here for us today to look at and enjoy. So this video is a photo mystery here at the Stony Hill, a fight on July 2nd of 1863, and I am historian Frank Patrick Marone Jr. of Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. I hope you've enjoyed this video. You'll want to check out some of my other videos nearby that I've shot over the years, like the Bloody Wheat Field, and the Rose Farm. And you can, of course, find those videos on YouTube and Rumble and Gettysburg Battlefield Truth on Truth Social.